Now, amongst those, perhaps to the surprise of some, given that he's often been seen as a loyalist, now set to vote against Theresa May's Brexit plan on November the 11th, next Tuesday, is the former Chief Whip, Head of Discipline, Mark Harper, and he joins me now. He's written about this in the Daily Telegraph today. Good morning to you. Why have you decided to, if I can put it this way, be disloyal?
Well, I'm not. I'm actually being very loyal to the promises that we made in last year's general election manifesto when we said we wouldn't have a customs union and also we wouldn't put any barriers in the way of trade between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And I'm afraid the Prime Minister's plan does exactly those things, and that's why I regretfully can't support it next week.
But I've just been talking to two of your Conservative colleagues, and their argument is probably if this goes down, we're going to end up in a Norway situation, which of course would not be in tune with what you said in the manifesto about the single market and the customs union.
Well, look, I've been very clear. I've been listening very carefully to what the Prime Minister said. She was very clear earlier this year that the backstop, with Northern Ireland being treated differently for customs and regulatory purposes, was not acceptable, and she said no UK Prime Minister could ever sign up to it. I'm afraid the deal that she's got before Parliament in the withdrawal agreement is exactly that, and I don't think is acceptable. She's gone back on that commitment, and it's a breach of what we promised the voters. And I think in politics you should keep the promises that you make in an election manifesto. That's what I'm doing next week.
No, I understand that, but obviously there's an instrumentality in this. If you vote down that deal, where does it go from there, or where would you like it to go?
Well, my own view is, I think if she were to go back, look, I would rather this happened before we got to next week, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But if the deal isn't voted through next week, I want her to go back to the European Council, which is happening 2 days later, and tell the European Union that if the backstop stays in the deal, it will not go through Parliament, and ask them, to take it out. That is what I want her to do. We'll obviously have to see how that goes, but there will then be new facts on the table. They will have to confront the fact that a deal with a backstop simply isn't going to get through Parliament, and they'll have to reflect on that carefully if they want to continue having a proper relationship with us on defence and security, the issues you're about to talk about later today.
If the backstop is removed or put into the political future negotiation area, which is pretty big if, given where the European Union is.
I accept that.
Would you then support the government?
Yes, I've been clear. If the backstop comes out of the withdrawal agreement, I would support the government. And by the way, it wouldn't just be me. I think she would then get the deal through with Conservative and DUP support. And I think that's really important. It's also worth saying, Adam, that if her deal were to actually go through next week, the question that I haven't heard an answer to is we would lose the support of our DUP allies, and I simply don't know how we would then govern. We would be in office but unable to govern effectively. And what we saw yesterday with those 3 government defeats, that would be what would happen every day in the House of Commons without the DUP, because we simply don't have a majority.
I mean, you're one of those, and there are many Conservatives who say whatever I felt during the referendum, I think we've got a commitment now to obey that decision, take Britain out of the European Union. Isn't the truth that the easiest way to do that is to back the deal?
No, I don't agree with that. Look, I voted Remain in the referendum, but I'm a Democrat, and the voters made a decision, and I think it's incumbent on politicians to deliver on that. So I want us to leave in a way that reflects the decision, but also the most important thing is the future relationship. And the reason why the backstop is a problem, it's partly a problem because of the way it treats an integral part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland, but also by trapping us in that backstop, which the Attorney General admitted on Monday we can't get out of, it weakens our negotiating hand, which guarantees that we will get a poor deal, which is what will govern our future for years and decades to come. And that's why I think it can't stay in the deal if it's going to get through Parliament.
Whose fault do you think it is that the backstop has become such an issue? I mean, were we negligent, really, of the Northern Ireland dimension during the referendum campaign, in spite of the efforts of Tony Blair and John Major to draw attention to it?
Well, I don't think it was thought through properly, but also, I went to Northern Ireland during the summer because I wanted to understand for myself the practicalities. But I've also looked very carefully. The head of British Customs, head of HMRC, the head of the Irish Customs Agency have both said they don't see any need for physical infrastructure on the border in any circumstances. So I'm prepared to take their expert opinion. Both the Irish government The British government and the EU have said they don't want a hard border, so therefore I don't understand why we have to have this so-called insurance policy in the deal at all. The way to deal with this is to have a good future trade agreement, which means that we won't have to have checks on the border. That's where it should be dealt with, and as I said, if that's what would happen, out of the withdrawal agreement, deal with it in the future relationship, then I think the Prime Minister will get her deal next week, and most importantly, for her as leader of the party, keep the Conservative Party together and get our DUP allies back on board so that we can move on and deal with the other important issues that the public wants us to deal with, rather than spending all of our time dealing with Brexit.
Mark Harper, thank you very much indeed.